coming back to school with me. We could have done it all so easily.
Hi, my name is Craig Thompson Wood. I'm your host with Teaching with Board Games, here today to do a video about teaching you how to play the game Dragon Rampant. If you haven't already seen my video about how to make an army for Dragon Rampant, you may wish to go watch that one first. It might be helpful to know a little bit more about how to create your army before how you play with it. This video is in response to some viewers who had seen that first video about how to make the army and then asked me to make a video about how to play the game as well. So, as I always say, I do love to hear from the viewers, and so when you make a request like this, I do my best to honor that request. There is on page 23 of the Dragon Rampant rulebook, there is some section here about the rules, conventions, things to be aware of. I'm not going to read them all out to you. Some of the things are common sense, but some of them just bear saying just to be 100% clear. Just things like when they talk about the dice, they're talking about regular six-sided dice, numbered 1 to 6. When they're talking about measurements, they're talking about inches. But now, although if you're using a different scale, you may choose to use centimeters. Fractions, in case of any fractions that occur, you round down. Things like that. So, and the last one is have fun. The game is supposed to be fun. Don't get so worked up over it that you're going to get upset. So in the game of Dragon Rampant, what you're doing is you're first off going to start off with a scenario. In the back section of the book, there's a section called the scenarios. And the scenarios are going to be the missions that you're playing. So once you've determined the scenario that you're playing, the scenario is also going to help you to determine who is the defender and who is the attacker, which is going to be important because unless it's a scenario that I'm not aware of, the attacker will always go first in every scenario. And so let me just dive right into now how the turn structure works. So we'd be starting off with the attacker. So as I mentioned before, as we start a turn of Dragon Rampant, the attacker is going to take the first turn. So the first thing that they're going to be doing is they're going to be rallying any battered units. And once they've done that, then they must test for any wild charges. And I'll explain those in just a moment. Following that, then they can activate all their other units. So let me explain first the rallying. So when a unit has been beaten in battle, they become battered. And I'll explain more of that in full detail a little bit later in the video. So every turn, the first thing that you need to do with that unit is you need to test their courage to see if they rally. So when rallying a unit, you have to roll the 2d6 and you have to roll equal to or over their courage stat in order to successfully rally. There may be modifiers involved, which I'll talk about later when I'm talking about the courage tests. But basically, if the unit passes, they are no longer battered. You can remove the battered token from them, but that's it for the turn. They cannot activate again this turn. They are just gathering themselves back up again, getting ready for the fight once more. If they fail, they're going to lose one more point of strength from their unit, and then they will then retreat again, when I'll explain retreating later in the video. The second thing you must always test for at the beginning of every turn is wild charges. A wild charge is a unit which is within a charge range when an attack, so they move forward, they could engage another unit. If that's the case, then they have to test a charge at that time. The important disclaimer here is that if that wild charge unit has just rallied, so the first thing you're doing is rallying that unit, and if they rallied, they still cannot charge that turn. Remember, the rallying is the only thing that that unit can do on that particular turn. And when you are testing for your wild charge, then you are going to be rolling versus their attack stat. The attack stat, you have to roll equal to or above their attack stat, and if that is successful, then that unit will then charge the enemy unit. So if the unit is able to, if they're within range of charging another unit, they must charge it if they can. I mean, you roll the dice, and if they pass the test, they will charge that unit. If there's two units of equal distance between them, or if there's two units that they could possibly charge, you are able to choose which unit they will charge. But they must charge one of those two units. So if you fail the roll for the wild charge, then the unit is not able to charge, but may also not activate for the rest of the turn. However, this is not going to end that player's turn, and I'll explain that in just a moment. So once you've resolved all of your rallying, once you've resolved all of your wild charges, you are then able to make orders for your other units as normal. So usually your standard orders are move, shoot, or attack. Now in Dragon Rampant, because of the fantasy element, you may have other things going on where there may be like spells or something fantastical, or there may be something like skirmish. So there's different things you could be ordering them to do, but the main point is that you're going to be choosing an order for one unit. So when you choose that unit, you're going to then roll your 2d6 for that unit's order. So if you wanted them to move, you're going to be comparing to their move stat, rolling a 2d6, and seeing if you roll equal to or above the required number. So for example, if a unit had a move stat of 6+, you're going to roll 2 dice. If you roll 6 or higher, the roll is successful, and that unit will move up to its full movement in a direction of your choice. And then you may go on to your next unit, order them, and so on and so on. Now, if at any point you should fail on your roll to activate that unit, not only does that unit not activate, you're going to end your turn. So as I've mentioned before with the wild chargers, if they fail to charge, that's not going to end your turn. But it will for any other unit which fails during the regular part of your activation. So it's going to make for some really agonizing decisions in terms of which units do you want to activate first. Some may be more important, but their chances are lower of activating than other ones. So maybe you want to get the easy ones done first, and then, but if you don't get that one done, then you're really going to be in a trouble. A good convention to get into the habit of is putting something next to the units which have activated, so that way you know that they are done. You may also choose to use different color sticker gems to represent the units which are battered, so that way again you're not mistaking battered units for non-battered units. So then if I was the attacker taking my first turn, I would play until such time that either A, all my units have been activated, B, I have failed an order test, in which case my turn ends immediately, or C, I choose to end it. Maybe not all the units have been activated, but I choose not to activate them. Alright, so let's look at the orders in a bit more detail. So with a successful move order, you're going to be able to move your unit up to its full movement statistic in a direction of your choosing. There's a few things you need to keep in mind when you're moving your units. First off is that every unit has to have a central model. So this is often a standard bearer or a musician or maybe a champion model, something that stands out, but all the models have to stay within 3 inches of that model. So there's no stringing out a long line of 12 models. You need to make sure that everything stays within close to that central figure. The second thing to note is when you are moving models, they can never approach within 3 inches of another unit, friend or foe. So unless they are going to be attacking the other unit, they cannot approach within 3 inches. The third thing to be aware of when you're making movement rolls is the terrain that is on the table. Be aware of any movement penalties, impassable terrain, things like that. The different types of terrain features are as such, so rough terrain would be like forests or maybe rough ground, which is going to have your movement. An obstacle might be a low wall, which the units are going to stop on the turn that they reach that wall, but the following turn they will go over it and continue the movement normally. And then impassable terrain is terrain like maybe a steep cliff or a giant wall, something that the unit can just not negotiate around no matter what. Alright, let's look at the order now of shooting. So you're going to roll the 2d6, you're going to compare that to the units shooting. If they are successful, then you are going to make a shooting attack against a unit within range. A successful shoot order is going to allow them to bring up to bear their missile weapons, breath weapons, whatever it is that they have that they are attacking at range against somebody else. When one unit is shooting another unit, this is the sequence that you follow. First, you're choosing your target. 2, you're going to roll to hit. 3, the target is going to reduce strength points. And 4, the target makes a courage test if necessary. So let's look at that in a bit more detail. So choosing the target. Now, one thing to know in Dragon Rampant, whether it's for charging or shooting, line of sight is all around the figures. They have a 360-degree field of vision. There's no fire arcs, there's no charge arcs, nothing like that. Wherever they want to go, wherever they want to shoot, they can do so. When you're choosing your targets, one convention is that you must, if there is a unit that can reach you during its next activation, you must shoot that unit. If there's no such unit, then you are free to choose your target. When you're shooting, you may not split your shots between targets. So if I have a unit of, say, 12 goblins, I cannot choose to shoot 6 arrows at one unit, 6 arrows at another unit. All my arrows from that one unit have to go towards the other unit. It should also be noted that other units, whether they're friendly or not, are going to block your line of sight. Finally, targets which are more than 12 inches away from the shooters are harder to hit, and I'll explain how in just a moment. So once you've chosen your target, you're going to resolve your shooting. Every unit in Dragon Rampant whether it's a missile troop or a combat troop, always starts with 12 dice worth of attacks, every unit. So as long as you are over half your strength, then you still get your 12 dice worth of attacks. As soon as your strength of your unit, your strength points of the unit have been reduced to half or less, you are then at half strength, so you only roll 6 dice. And that is the convention across all units. So once you determine how many dice you're shooting, so say I'm shooting with a full unit of goblins, I'm rolling 12 dice, and I then look at my dice results, and I compare those to my goblin shooting results. Once I know how many hits I have, I then compare that to the armor value of my opponents. So say my opponents have an armor value of 2, then that would mean for every 2 hits that my goblins have is 1 strength point to my enemy. If the enemy is in cover, their armor is increased by 1. So if they had an armor of 2, it would now become 3, which means for every 3 points of damage that I did with my goblins, 1 strength point is removed from that unit. Remember again, fractions are rounded down. So once you know how many strength points of damage you've done to the unit, you're going to remove that much strength points from the unit. So remember, some units may be 1 strength point per model in the unit, so something small like goblins, or maybe I'm doing something like a large unit of minotaurs, and the minotaurs are perhaps 4 points per model. So if I have 4 points per model and there's only 3 models in my unit, then and I did 3 points of damage, well then no minotaurs are being removed, but maybe I'm going to put some token down to indicate that one model has received 3 wounds. So as soon as the next strength point of damage is done, then that one model will be removed. Now if a unit being shot at is in cover, then they add 1 to their armor value. So in the case of what I mentioned before, there's an armor 2 unit, and they are in cover, then their armor becomes 3, which means for every 3 hits that you're doing, that you do 1 strength point of damage. One thing to note too is when you are firing through cover, so say you're firing through a group of woods, or say an area of smoke, then the shooting unit can see through up to 3 inches of that obscuring terrain. But if it's more than 3 inches, then it's completely obscuring. And the final thing to do once the shots are all resolved, unit which has been shot has received any strength points of damage, then they need to make a courage test. If they fail their courage test, they become battered and retreat. If they pass their courage test, there's no further effect. Okay, so here we're going to do an example of shooting between some Hero-scaped orcs and some Games Workshop plague bearers. So mixing and matching different game systems to show you how they can all be compatible for Dragon Rampant. So in this situation, I'm treating the plague bearers as though they are light foot troops, which means that they have an armor of 2 and a courage of 4+. Those will be the only stats in their role here as victims of the shooting. And the orcs I'm treating as light missile troops, which means that they have to carry out the shooting order, they have a shoot order of 6+, and their shooting attack is 5+ at 18 inches. So with 18 inches, we're obviously within range here between the orcs and the plague bearers. And if the orcs wanted to shoot somebody further away, they couldn't, because the plague bearers could reach them on the next turn. So the orcs must shoot the ones who are within attack range, because those are the ones threatening them immediately. Now I'm treating all of these characters as though they have 2 wounds each to represent their toughness. The plague bearers have there's 6 models left, which means they are at full strength right now, whereas the orcs only have 5 troops left, which means they've lost 2 strength points somewhere along the way. But even with one of their archers missing, they are still going to roll their full 12 dice. It's not until you reach half or lower than half of your unit strength that you then reduce the number of attacks to half. So you'd only be rolling 6 dice once they're reduced to half strength. So in this case, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to test for the orcs. Their shooting order value is 6+. So we roll 2 dice and we compare, and I rolled an 8, so the orcs are able to shoot. So as I said, the orcs are able to use 12 dice in their shots, and so they roll the dice up, and their shoot value is 5 or 6. So we're going to take any of the 5s and 6s. We're going to put them to one side, move that. That goes there, there. Not too bad. The orcs did not too badly there. So we have 2, 4, 6 hits. So now the armor on a plague bearer is 2. So that means that for every 2 hits, you're doing 1 strength point of damage. That's 1, 2, 3 strength points of damage. So with each plague bearer having 2 wounds, that's 1, 2, And then the third one would go to Plague Bear. You may just indicate it like that to show that he's taking a wound. And it may be a convention too to just keep the model lying down beside, so that way you're remembering how many wounds were taken. So that shows 2 for the one killed, and 1 more there is 3. So that then, what you do now is the Plague Bears would immediately have to make a courage test. So their courage is 4+. They've taken 3 wounds. So they are rolling. They have to roll 4 or over on the 2 dice, but subtracting 3 from the roll for the 3 wounds that they've sustained from this attack. So we roll, and we roll a 9. -4 is 5. So the Plague Bears are actually -3 is 6. I don't know why -4. And so the Plague Bears are still in the battle. Alright, next I'm going to talk about attack. The attack order is what gets you into a combat situation. So whether it's a wild charge or a regular charge in which you choose to attack, move into hand-to-hand combat with an enemy, this is what's happening with an attack order. So when you do an attack order, you roll a 2d6, you have to get equal to or above your attack order stat on your profile. So in order to make that attack order, you have to roll 2d6 and roll equal to or above the attack order statistic on that unit's profile. If they do so, they are then able to move in and attack the enemy. Now, what's important to note in an attack situation is that both sides are going to be attacking in the combat. And so when you look at the unit profiles for the attackers and the defenders, you will see that they have statistics for attack value and defense value. The attackers, when attacking, will attack with their attack value. The defenders fighting back will attack with their defense value. So the first thing you're going to do when you're doing an attack order is you're going to be looking for whatever units are within your move distance for the unit that you want to activate. So if there are several units within a move distance, you can choose which one you wish to attack. Once you determine the unit they're going to attack, you roll for your attack order. Then you have to consult the unit which is being charged. Do they have an ability to do something about that? Some units may have something like countercharge or evade, or some other ability which allows them to do something about the fact that they're being charged. And then, assuming there's nothing else happening, you're going to move the attacking unit into the combat. Next step, attack. So the attackers are attacking using their attack value, defenders are attacking using their defense value. So after all the dice have been rolled for both sides, and both sides can roll simultaneously, because once all the dice are rolled, then both sides simultaneously are going to reduce their strength values depending on the number of hits that have been done. So just like with the attacks with the missile weapons, you're going to roll your dice, you're going to compare to the value, see how many hits you've done. For every number of hits, you compare to the armor value, and for if the armor is 2, for every 2 hits, you take off 1 strength point. If the armor value is 3, for every 3 hits, you take off a strength point, and so on. The final step then is going to be rolling for courage. So whichever side took damage will test for courage. If both sides took damage, both test for courage. If neither side took damage, neither test for courage. But if only one side took damage, then it tests for courage. It is important to note that at the end of a combat, no matter what happens, one of the 2 units in that combat will retreat by the end. So even in this situation where both units say neither received any damage or one took damage but did not retreat, you are then going to be determining which one is going to retreat. To do that, then, it's going to be which one took more damage. So in the case of where both sides are equal in the number of strength points they lost, or maybe neither of them lost strength points, then it will always be the unit which is the attacker will be the one to retreat. And I will talk about retreats in just a moment. And as I mentioned during the missile weapon portion, whatever it is, whether it's missile weapons or hand-to-hand weapons, any unit when it's fighting is rolling 12 dice to attack unless it is at half or lower strength. A couple of notable modifiers to be aware of in a combat situation is, one, if you are fighting in a rough terrain, so say you're fighting in a copse of woods, both the attackers and the defenders are going to have an attack value of 5+, and a defense value of 5+, and will have an armor of 2. So their normal armor and attack values will be negated due to the terrain. The only exception to this rule is if one or both of the units have the ranger ability. They fight with their normal statistics. It also should be noted that any unit which is battered will only ever hit on a 6+. Okay, so continuing on with that battle we'd had before, going to take a look at these Plague Bears versus the Hero-Escape Orcs again. So now, say it's gone on to the other player's turn, so now the Plague Bears have a chance to retaliate against the Orcs who shot them last turn. So what's going to happen now is we're going to start off, the player declares, okay, the Plague Bears are going to charge in against the Orcs. So being light foot troops, they have an attack order of 6+, so the Plague Bearers roll, and they rolled a 10. So with a 10, they're able to do that, so you're going to move the troops in. So they're going to come into combat. And when you come into a combat, you want to try and use the movement to get as many of the models into base-to-base contact with the enemy as possible. Not that it really matters, because even though these ones are not in base-to-base contact with the enemy, they still will contribute to the defense. So the Plague Bearers, they sustained 3 wounds. They sustained 3 damage out of 12, so they're still above half. So they're going to roll 9 dice for their attack. Now, the attacks between the attackers and defenders can be done simultaneously. I'm just going to do them one by one because I've only got the 12 dice. So we're going to do the Plague Bearers first, and they're hitting on 5+. So they do 1, 2, 3, 4. So they do 4 hits against the Orcs, which means the Orcs are going to sustain 2 because they have an armor of 2. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and remember I said the Orcs have 2 wounds each. The Orcs are fighting back. Again, this is happening simultaneously, so these Orcs who had died have not actually died yet. So the Orcs will still fight at their full strength for this battle, and they roll again like their defense value was 5 or 6, so they also need 5s or 6s against the attack here. So the Orcs fared a little bit better than the Plague Bearers did. So they did 3 strength points, because for every 2, it's 1 strength point, because the Plague Bearer's armor of 2. So that 1 kills him, and then 2 more strength points kills 1 more. So those ones are removed. And so now what's going to happen is both sides are going to roll against their courage. So the Orcs have 2, 4, 6 wounds left, which means that they have taken 6 strength points worth of damage through the game. They have a courage of 4+, so we roll the 2 dice. Well, they did very well. They rolled an 11, minus the 6 damage they've taken through the game so far. Leaves them with a 5, so the Orcs have not broken from this battle. The Plague Bearers have also taken 6 damage, so they roll 2 dice, and they rolled a 5, so they are breaking. But now when we look at it, they rolled a 5 and have taken 6 damage. So 5 minus 6 is -1. So the Plague Bearers have actually not only retreated, they have lost their courage and have fled from the table to never return. When you subtract the result, if the net result is less than 0, equal to or less than 0, then they're gone. They are no longer a part of this fight. So in the end of missile fire, or in the end of an attack phase, there is going to be a courage test. So let's take a moment now and talk about those courage tests. So a courage test is to test the unit's resolve to remain on the battlefield when things aren't going their way. So under the following situations, units are going to test their courage. First and most common is if a unit has lost any strength points from either shooting or an attack action. Second is if the unit is attempting to rally after being battered and to remove their battered marker. Third is if their leader has been killed. Once the leader of the army has been killed, all the units need to make a courage test to see if they lose their heart and run from the battlefield. And the same would also be true if the leader maybe lost his or her own courage and fled from the battlefield, at which point all the other units would see if they would follow suit with their leader. And the final time where you will make tests for courage is when a warband is at half or lower strength, then the rest of the warband is going to test to see if they bottle and run. So when making a courage test, what you're going to do is you're going to be rolling 2 dice 6. You're going to be looking at the unit's profile and comparing to the statistic there. So if the unit has a 4+, then you have to roll 4 over in order to stay on the battlefield. Now, it should be noted that you're subtracting 1 from your dice roll for every strength point of damage that the unit has taken. So in the instance where a unit has taken, say, 6 strength points of damage, they're getting -6 to the roll, which means on 2d6 you're going to need to roll 10 or higher in order to keep the unit around. It's not likely. However, you can also add 1 to your roll if your leader is within 12 inches of the unit that is making the test. And that is it. That is how you make a courage test. So you're just rolling the 2d6, comparing to the unit profile, -1 for every strength point that they've lost, +1 if your leader's within 12. Simple. If the unit fails, they become battered and are going to retreat. And I'll explain retreating in just a moment. If they pass, then there's no further effect. So if the courage test has been failed, there's two things that you need to consider. How badly have they failed? If they have failed, but the result is greater than 0, so if their final results of the dice after the modifiers is 1 or more, but they've still failed, then they are still on the battlefield. They just become battered. But if they fail and the result is less than 0, that means they are completely broken and they are removed from the game with no chance of returning. And if a unit fails a courage test and that unit was already battered, they stay battered, but they will lose 1 additional strength point in addition to making that additional retreat again. So let me talk about retreating. So retreating is when the unit has failed a courage test. During a retreat, the unit must use its full movement value to get as far away from the enemy as they can, so moving directly away from the enemy that beat them. There are a couple stipulations to this. When retreating, you must remember to count any modifiers for rough terrain. So if the unit is moving 10 inches, but it's through rough terrain, they're only going to move 5 inches. It should be noted that at any point during the retreat, the enemy, the retreating unit, must not come within 3 inches of any other unit, friend or foe, which is a standard rule across all movement. If for any reason the unit cannot make their full move, whether it's due to impassable terrain or whether there's enemies surrounding them or friends surrounding them, they will run away as far as they can, then come to a stop. At that point, they're going to roll 1d6, compare that to their courage. If the result is less than the courage statistic on their profile, they will then lose strength points equal to the result of the dice. So if their courage was 5+ and they rolled a 4, they will then lose 4 more strength points from their unit. It should also be noted that if at any point during a retreat a model leaves, if any of the models of the unit leave the table, the whole unit is removed from the game with no chance of coming back. So we talked about battered. Battered is when you're beaten in a combat, where you're beaten by missile troops or you're beaten by an attack and you are retreating from a combat. As I mentioned earlier on, you should be putting some kind of special colored token to indicate that that unit is battered. As I say, I use one color for my units which have activated, and I use a separate color for the unit which are battered. There's a few things which you need to always remember about battered units. One, you always need to test for them at the start of every turn for rallying them. Two, battered units cannot do any other action on their turn except attempting to rally. And once they do rally, that's it for their turn. They don't get to do anything else that turn. They will activate again the next turn, provided they haven't been broken again before their next turn happens. Three, but rallied units are only going to move if they are required to do so by a failed courage test. If an enemy chooses to engage a battered unit, that battered unit is only going to be able to hit back if they roll 6s. Finally, when a unit is battered, they lose all their other abilities, like wild charge, counter charge. Any other abilities that they have on their profile are now lost while they're battered, including any leadership abilities. So if your leader becomes battered, any of their special leadership abilities are also lost for the time that they are battered. If a battered unit gets battered again, beaten in another combat, in which case then they are going to retreat one more time, plus lose that additional strength point for being battered a second time in a row. So let's just quickly recap. In the game of Dragon Rampant, you're choosing the scenario, determining the attacker and the defender. The attacker takes the first turn. On every turn, the attacker is going to attempt to rally any battered units. They're going to test for any wild charges. Once those are done, they can then start to order their units. They will choose one of their units, they will assign it an order. They will roll the dice to see if the unit carries out the order. If the unit carries out the order, then they do whatever that order was. They then move to the next unit and test that one. At whatever they fail one of those orders, then their turn immediately ends and it goes over to the defender. The defender then tests for rallying any battered units, they test for any wild charges, and they start to then do their orders. And it goes back and forth until the victory conditions have been met. And that is really Dragon Rampant. It is very simple, sleek, and once you understand the rules and play it a few times, it becomes much more appreciable how easy and smooth this game is. So hopefully this rules video helps you. If there's anything I got wrong, please leave me a message in the comment section below. If there's anything else I can maybe say to make it more clear, leave me a message in the comment section below. What I thought might be good is to do a demonstration of a few rounds of battle just to give a sense of how it all works. Again, in the interest of being as diverse as possible in the different types of miniatures that I'm using from different game ranges, my first army here, my first force is going to be 9 points worth of undead from the Super Dungeon Explorer line. So we have here a unit of skeletons with a necromancer. The necromancer is the leader, and it is a heavy missile troop. So even though the skeletons have no thing, the heavy missiles come from the fact that he's casting a lot of spells. They are just the damage sponge. So there's 10 of them. So with 12 wounds, each one has 1 wound, and he has 2. That's how that works. Okay, then we have, and so this, what I've done too, and I highly recommend, is always just write down the stats on a little cue card or something, just a slip of paper to remind yourself so you don't have to keep looking things up in the book. So there's zombies here. Each zombie, there's 6 zombies, so each one's worth 2 strength points. This is a ravenous horde. And then we have 2 giant zombies in the back here, and they are lesser war beasts. So those giant zombies are lesser war beasts, so they will have the wild charge. And so they are 6 strength, so each zombie is 3 strength. So each zombie here is 2 strength, each zombie here is 3 strength, each skeleton is 1, and the necromancer is 2, and that is 9 points of undead from Super Dungeon Explorer. And the zombies and undead will be facing off against these humans here from the game Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. I just pulled the miniatures out of that one, decided I'm going to use those for this example. So the back here we have the peasants, and they are a light foot troop. So put that one there. And then we have the leader here in amongst these knights, and they are an elite foot troop. So with the humans, because there's 12 of them there, each one is worth 1 strength point each. And the elite foot troops only have a strength of 6, so they're going to be 1 strength each, including the leader's 1 strength. So that makes for the 6 wounds. And that also comes to 9 points of humans from Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. Okay, so here's a quick, easy setup just that I did for this particular example. I'm not playing any scenario. I do recommend playing scenarios because it just makes it more interesting to have an actual objective for the battle rather than just trying to wipe each other out. But I just thought I would keep it very simple for the first example. So in this one, I'm going to say that the zombies and the undead here are the attackers. They're coming into this human village, and the human village got wind of them. I mean, literally got wind of them. They smelled them coming, the decaying flesh, and mounted a quick defense against the oncoming undead horde. First thing we're going to do is that we do with any turn, we're going to look for rallying battered troops. Well, it's the start of the game, so nobody's been battered yet. So we look for wild charges. So the wild beasts here, so they're just out of charge range, so they're not going to be able to charge into the troops here. So then we go into the order phase. So I'm going to maybe move my zombies up, and the zombies have a move of 6+. So the zombies are going to move, and I roll a 10, so the zombies are moving, and they're going to move, they can move 6 inches. And what they're going to do maybe is just start to get over this way, and maybe start to make a bit of a roadblock for these warriors to protect their masters there. And, well, they're one master, the necromancer. And then the zombie gang, giants rather, the zombie giants are going to have a move of 6+, so they're going to move, yes they are, with a 9, that beats their 6+ movement, so they can move up to 12, so they as well will come in front like that to protect. Now, they're going to make sure they leave lines of sight open because the missile troops' line of sight will be blocked by units, whether they're friendly or not, so you have to keep that in mind. So now the necromancer is going to try to shoot. He has a shoot order characteristic of 7+. Check that, and I rolled a 6. So he cannot get his spells together. So he failed. So, but it was also the last unit. So even if he hadn't failed, I have nothing else to do. But anytime a unit does fail, means that their turn is over. And actually, one thing I wasn't doing is I was forgetting to put my little tokens down to indicate that these two had gone. So they have finished, and he's finished. So now we go on to the human turn. The human turn, we start off, we look for rallying battered troops. Nobody is battered. We look for wild charges. Nobody on the human side has wild charges. So we're going to go straight into the order phase. So I'm going to look what orders I want to do. And, okay, I'm going to move the peasants. So they have a 5+, and I roll a 10. So the peasants, now remember they can't get within 3, so I'm just going to put a little marker here at 3 inches to tell me where the 3 inches is away from them. It's right there. they're going to come like this. They're going to try to make sure they're getting themselves out of the line of sight of that necromancer with his nasty, nasty spells. So, use the zombies as some cover. And so now looking at the elite warriors, I'm going to move them as well. So I'm going to move them doing the same thing. Just don't let that kind of get me funny ideas. Take out these units one at a time, and then maybe the humans can tag team on the skeletons and necromancer if they can take out these ones separately. Alright, so the humans, both of their units, they only have 2 units, they both have gone. So now we go back to the undead. So we start off, we rally battered troops. Well, there are no battered troops. We look for wild charges. Well, the zombie giants here do have a wild charge, so they have to make their roll to see if they are going to charge. So the zombies giants have an attack of 5, and they rolled a 7. So they have successfully charged. If they failed, it would not have ended the turn for the undead, but it would mean that these zombies would do nothing else. So they're going to come charging into the elite knights. So the zombies are attacking, so they are, because they initiated the charge, they have an attack value of 4+. Both units are at full strength, so we're both rolling 12 dice. So we have all 12 here. I'll roll these ones for the zombie giants and then for the elite fighters. So they have a 4+, so we have these. Not a good showing for the zombie giants, unfortunately. So we have 3, 6. We have 6 hits. So what I'll do is I'll just put this 6 here to show that they were hit 6 times, so we don't forget. And then for the elite warriors, they have a defense value of 4+. Because they are the defenders in the fight, they're only hitting on a 4+. They're better when they're attacking. So their defense value 4, they're hitting on 4s, and they do worse than the zombies. They only hit 5 times. So those are the final results. They got hit 6 times, they got hit 5 times. Now, let's look at the final strength points, the removals. So the elite warriors have an armor value of 4, so that means for every 4 hits, you remove 1 model. So with 6, you're only removing 1 model, or just taking 1 strength point of damage, and each one of these warriors is 1 strength point. So 1 is removed, the remaining 2 are discarded. It's considered to be just bouncing off the armor. So the good armor of these warriors has saved them. So they took 1 strength point of damage. The zombies, on the other hand, have 3 armor, so they too take 1 point of damage. So I will use this dice here to indicate they have taken 1 point of damage. So both sides took 1 point of damage. So now what we need to do is we need to make a courage test, because one of these sides will retreat. There's, in every combat, one side has to retreat by the end of the combat. So with these warriors, they have a courage of 3+. They've lost 1 warrior, but their leader is here. So the -1 for the strength point lost, +1 for the leader means that they just need to roll 3 or higher. And they did. They rolled a 10, so they are not fleeing. And then we look at the zombie giants. They have a courage of 4+. They took 1 strength point of damage, but their leader is also within 12 inches, so they roll and they do not flee from that. So now we look at when neither side flees the combat due to courage rolls, you look for the number of strength points lost. So the number of strength points lost on both sides was 1. So even here, it's a tie. So the final tiebreaker then is that in this case, when neither side flees and the strength points lost on each side is equal, the attackers will always be the ones to run away. So the zombie giants are going to move away 12 inches, but remember they can't go within 3 inches of their own units, so they're going to come up to here. They have to flee directly away from the unit that caused them, and we'll they have to move directly away from the unit that caused them to flee, and we'll put that marker there to indicate that they are now battered. So that was the wild charge. So now we're going to go on to the other attacks. So I would say the Necromancer can see along the line here, between this guy to this guy. So he's going to fire his missiles at this troop, try to wear them down some more, needing a 7+ for the shoot order. Rolled a 10. Oh, and there. Yeah. So I will put this here before I forget to indicate now that this unit has activated. The Necromancer shooting. His shoot value is 4+, and he has a range of 18 inches, so he can easily hit them. So he needs 4+, so all of these are hits, and all of these are misses. So we have 2, 4, 6, 7. So again, we're just shy of doing a second point of damage, so we lose one more warrior, because for every 4, so these 4 do 1 strength point of damage, killing 1 warrior. These 3 are just shy of their 4th point, which would have killed a second one. But what this means is because they took another point of damage, strength point, another strength point lost means that they have to make another courage test. So now they're at -2 because they've lost 2 strength points, +1 because the leader's there. So overall it's a -1 to this roll. So the roll is 6, -1 is 5, their courage is 3+, they're fine, they're not going anywhere. So now the final unit to activate would be the zombies over there. So they're going to make an attack action. They're going to charge into those peasants. And they want to. So their movement is 6 inches. So just make sure you move as many into base-to-base contact as possible. So the zombies are attacking at full, well, both units are attacking at full strength. And the shambling ravenous horde here has an attack value of 6. So no matter what, they need 6s to hit these peasants. Wow, that is pretty good. They did 5 hits on the peasants. So use my handy dandy dice here to indicate 5 hits on the peasants. And then against the zombies, the peasants are rolling, and because they are the defenders, as I say, they are better at defending, so they need a 4+. And so they also didn't do, that was a hit, that was like a 5. There. Alright, so they did 7 hits. So they did 7 hits to the zombies. So the zombies have an armor of 1, so that means they took 7 damage. So every zombie is 2, so it's 2, 4, 6, and then we'll use this dice here to indicate 1 more point of damage to him. And then the humans took 5 with an armor of 2, means that they lose 2, and the last one is negated by their armor. So the zombies lost 7. They are going to make a courage test at -7 with a +1 because they are within 12 inches of their leader. Well, they rolled a 12, so 12 -7 is 5, +1 is 6, and their courage is 5+, so the zombies actually do not retreat. Well, not because of that. Now the humans are not within 12 inches of their leader. They lost 2 strength points, so they're at -2 to this roll, and oh my goodness. So at -2 to the roll, with a 2, the net result is 0. When the net result is 0 or less, that means the humans have completely fled the battlefield. Even though they were destroying those zombies, they just couldn't handle it and they took off. So those humans have fled the battlefield, never to come back again. If those humans had made the roll, then the zombies, again, would have been the ones to have left because they had taken more damage than the humans, so they would have automatically fled at that point. So that is these zombies done. So now we go on to the human turn. So the humans are going to charge. Yeah, so they're going to charge these zombies here. And they have an attack of 5+. So they, oh well, first we need to rally battered troops, but any battered troops have fled the table. So we don't have battered troops, we don't have wild charges, so we are just going to charge with these ones. and they're coming in to fight. So even though only the leader is technically made contact, everybody in the unit still fights. And even though they've taken a couple casualties from this unit, they're still above half, so they're still fighting with all 12 dice. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So the humans are attacking first. And now as attackers, they're hitting on a 3+. So, wow, they only missed twice. So that's 10 hits. So just put that there for 10 hits. And then the zombies, giants get to fight back. And the zombie giants have the defense value is 6, but even if it was better, they would still only be hitting on a 6 because they are battered. But let's see how they do, and they get not a hit on them. So the humans did 10 points. With the zombies' armor of 3 means they take 3 more damage. And remember I said each zombie is 3 points, so we'll just remove that guy altogether, leaving that one with his 1 wound. So that means this unit has now taken 4 points of damage, that has 4 strength points lost, so they're going to take a courage test at -4 with a +1 because the leader is within 12 inches, so that's a total of -3. And they rolled a 7, -3 is 4, and their courage is 4+, so he's fine. The humans did not take a single hit, so the zombie is automatically going to retreat again, and he would then retreat away from the humans. And because he was already battered when he fled, he takes another point of damage, so he's down to 1 wound left. And that was the humans' one and only remaining unit. So now we go on to the zombie turn. First thing we're going to do, rally a battered unit. And 5, he has 4 strength points lost, so it's -4 plus 1 means -3. So 5 is, no, he's not rallied, but he's not going to move anymore from there. Fire the spells from the Necromancer, needing a 7, that's a good one, into the elites, needing 4s, got a few, 2, 4, 6, 7 again. Oh, if there was 8, there would be 2 people dead, but as it is, just 1 more gone. So there's 3 gone. So 3 have been removed from the unit. So 3 strength points lost means -3. You don't look at the number of models removed from the unit, it's the number of strength points lost in the unit. I don't mean to be unclear about that. 3 strength points have been lost from the unit, so it's -3 to the courage roll. The leader is in the unit, so it's +1 to the courage roll. So it's a total of -2. Roll an 8, which is total of -2 is 6. They have passed. So that was their activation. So the zombies may activate, and they are going to move. They do, and they're just going to come shuffling up here. And that's their activation. So now it's back to the humans. The humans have to make they don't have any rally tests, they don't have any wild charges, so they're going to make a charge into this unit here, try and finish off the Necromancer. So they are now they are at half strength. They're down to 3 models, so they're only making half their attacks. So now they're only down to 6, and they're needing 3s to hit when they're attackers, because their attack value is 3+. So they get 4 hits. The defense value of the Necromancer in his unit is 5+, but they are rolling all of their dice because they have because they haven't been wounded yet. 5+, so they only do 1, 2, which isn't enough to hurt the humans. And so the game would continue until it comes to its logical conclusion, but as I say, when you're playing scenarios, the scenario will dictate at what point you have met the victory conditions to win the game. And that would be the way I'd recommend playing. Well, that's going to wrap it up for today's video. If you have any questions about Dragon Rampant, or if you have any other ideas for games you might like to see on the channel, review, particularly ones that you think have a really strong educational component. Please leave me that message in the comment section below. Remember that I'm making videos once a week, so check in every week. Hit like and subscribe down below, and hit that little bell button so that you get notified every time I'm putting up those new videos. I do love to hear from the viewers, so love to hear your ideas. But until next time, I'm Craig Thompson Wood, your host with Teaching with Board Games, saying thanks for coming to the classroom.
Are you coming back to school with me?